Garland Nixon, thank you very much for being my guest on Syriana Analysis. You are a radio talk show host and political analyst based in Washington, D.C., if I'm correct. I would like to speak with you about the Twitter files or the bombshell that we're dealing with on Twitter nowadays. We all know that we have been so long on Twitter, and we had lots of suspicions about the previous, I would say, bureaucrats, the way they were dealing with the tweets, the way they were dealing with certain profiles, the way they were dealing with certain political events that affect every single person of us, because even if we are not interested in politics, politics is interested in us. So it was very important to shed light on this issue, especially after Elon Musk takeover of Twitter, who purchased Twitter for $44 billion, and he took over the CEO of Twitter, right? And since then, he gave a few journalists and authors access to Twitter's internal documents that have been rapidly published to the general public. What are these documents? What's the nature of these documents that we're speaking about here that are called Twitter files? And should the general public in general be concerned about it?
Yes, number one, for those who don't know, there's probably, well, come to think of it, in that it's being heavily censored by mainstream media. There are probably a lot of people who don't know, but Elon Musk called in several people, several well-known journalists, and he gave them apparently permission to go throughout Twitter, to talk to people, to search in certain areas, certain names and phrases, and to look in specific areas to find information from deep within the bowels of Twitter that people may want to know, or that these Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, et cetera, may want to get out, and outcomes of this stuff. And here, I'll start with this. There's so many levels that we can address this from. The first thing that I think is interesting about this is these files, because before I go into that, let me say, what's the main thing that we learned here? What's the principal thing that we learned here from the Twitter files? The incestuous relationship between the government, and not just the FBI, but the government on many levels, many different agencies. We found that even state and local agencies now had, basically a doorway that they could get into Twitter. So the government had an incestuous relationship with Twitter, but not just Twitter. They're meeting with many other social media companies. So that's the main thing that we found out, and we can get into the various details of the things that we found out. But that's the principal thing, that there was no line between government and corporation in this particular instance, and that the government was lying about it, that Twitter was lying about it. So there we get our mens rea. There we get our criminal intent, our criminal state of mind, in that the government was deliberately lying to the people. Jack Dorsey lied to Congress about it, said we're not shadow banning people. So we see that the government and Twitter were working hand in hand. They were doing things, kind of nefarious acts. They were intentionally lying to Congress about them. They were intentionally lying to the American people about what they were doing. So this is a very shadowy, clandestine. That's the bottom line. It was a clandestine operation, in that both the government and the social media corporations were lying about it, that they weren't doing it. We also found something that's very interesting. And to me, this is one of the most interesting things. This is one of the most powerful things that we found out. And this is the big one to me out of everything. There's so many. And that is that the FBI, December 19th, or on around December of 2019, they got Hunter Biden's laptop. They filled out the proper paperwork for it. They did it legally. Hunter Biden had left his laptop at as everybody knows the story, a computer store. The FBI goes and gets it, and they bring it back. Now, it is kind of hard to believe that they didn't look at it, that they didn't, look on it, that they didn't try to figure out where it came from, et cetera. That's implausible. So they had the laptop. They knew that it was original. They knew it was Hunter Biden's, and they knew that it had some very dangerous things for the potential president, Joe Biden, on it. So you would think that but now let's read this. Legally, they were required to start an investigation, in that they had apparently some probable cause, or at minimum reasonable suspicion, that crimes may have been committed. Everything they needed to start an investigation. So you got something, a laptop, you got reasonable suspicion, probable cause on there. Now, what do you do? What did Twitter do? They went to the social media companies and deliberately, with malice and a forethought, lied to the social media companies. They knew that this laptop was original laptop. They knew it was Hunter Biden's laptop. They then went to the social media companies and said, they didn't even tell them that they knew anything about the laptop. They then said the Russians may have hacked some information relative to Hunter Biden's laptop, and they're going to drop it right around the election. And you need to adjust your terms of service to make it easier for you to censor people. And as soon as it came out, the day before it came out, the FBI found out it was going to come out. They had some discussion with Twitter about it. And all of the social media platforms went along with what they said. They all censored it. But the big part of it is it was a misinformation operation. The FBI actually did a deliberate misinformation operation on the social media companies. And of course, therefore, it was aimed at the American people to, let's be honest with, to interfere with the election. Yeah. So to me, that was the biggest thing, man. They lied and they knew it. There could be no further evidence of criminal intent than that.
Actually, Garland, I would like to mention here two things. First, like let's say 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the people used to form their ideas also through the TV channels, but also there were certain political gatherings, political parties trying to form public opinions. So they were even trying to infiltrate political parties in order to shape public opinion. Now this has moved into social media platforms, and lots of people, they don't go into big political gatherings to give speeches or try to give presentations and influence people's opinions. It's happening on Twitter. It's happening on YouTube. So it's very naive thing to think that these state security apparatuses won't intervene in the social media giants, right? Because those are the ones who are basically shaping public opinion during the pandemic, after the pandemic, before Trump, after Trump, and all this. Like I'm Syrian, and I'm sitting here and I'm just following the events in the United States. It's so clear to me how the manipulation works through the social media and the mainstream media. And in the case of, for example, Hunter Biden laptop story, if you go to every single American mainstream media outlets, maybe in exception for Tucker Carlson, I don't know, they were all saying as if there is a united phrase sent to them to use these certain phrases, and they were all repeated like a parrot. Like for me, these journalists are not journalists. They're just repeating the storyline or the talking points that have been sent to them, right? But what really is interesting here that I would like to ask you, why would the FBI here in this certain case of Hunter Biden's laptop story were biased in favor of Biden and not Trump? So why did the FBI prefer someone like Biden to be elected and not Trump in this case?
Well, because the FBI is the system's secret police. In a totalitarian state, the people in charge have a secret police who goes around and they maintain control of the narrative. They may ensure that everybody is, acting in accordance with the rules that they set forward. That's all the FBI has ever been. It's an attack dog to attack anyone and anything and any entities that push back against the prevailing narrative of the system. In the 60s, whether it was Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, it didn't matter. The Kennedys, it didn't matter if they were in office, out of office, running for office. The FBI's job is to ensure that no people who stray ideologically from the system, from the neoliberal, neoconservative ideology, is allowed to rise to power. When it came to Donald Trump, it was quite simple. Donald Trump doesn't know the rules. He's not a part of the empire. He's not. Donald Trump gave them some of the things they wanted, of course, but they don't want some of the things. They want 100%. They want a person who is going. See, think about this. They want a person who is going to preside over. The president presides, from their perspective, over the United States. The American people somehow got this idea that the president is the leader of government, to govern over a country and to govern over a people, which would mean responsive to the needs of the people, responsive to the polls, responsive to things like that. The system sees the president as someone who presides over an existing system. And in that they preside over an existing system, their principal job is to protect the system not question the system, to push what the system wants pushed. That's their job. They're like, he's the leading edge, whether it's PR, policy, or whatever, to say the system wants this, this is what we want. And this is how we're going to go about doing it and fight for it. Whereas Trump had some level of independence. He didn't understand that he presided over a system. He felt like a CEO. So he'd say, no, I don't think this is the best interest of the people, or the people don't want this, or I don't want it, or my ideology doesn't align with it, whatever. I'd rather do this. It's unthinkable for a person who's president to push back against this neoliberal, neoconservative system, because it exposes the flaws in the system. If the guy at the top questions the system, right, it exposes that there are flaws in the system, that it's valid. If you look at Twitter, what was this all about? Right, wrong, or indifferent. The people who were censored were people who were questioning the system. And oftentimes, now it's come out now in the latest, oftentimes people who were quoting government websites, people who were quoting other, the New York Times, the Washington, they would literally attach something from the New York. I had it happen to me on Facebook. I literally posted an article from NBC News about Nazis in Ukraine. I was suspended for 30 days. But you could go to NBC News and that article was still up. But it was about, we've got to stop this, because Garland's posting it particularly, and he's an anti-war, anti-imperialist guy. He's doing that in an effort to push back and expose the contradictions in the system. And because Trump, in doing some of the things that he did, exposed the contradictions of the system, they can't allow that. So now if you watch all this Trump, what does it always come to? We may do this, we may do that. Looks like Trump did Trump do that. And then sooner or later, somebody always says, we have to make sure he can't hold office again. We have to make sure he can't get to the White House again. Now, you and I both know who and what Trump is, but he's not exactly what they want. And now they're looking for a way to stop him from becoming president again. It's not that he would do the things that we want, but he may do one or two things that they don't like. He may say, bring the troops out of Syria or South Korea or something like that. And then, they're not going to allow that to happen. And they can't allow that level of contradiction. They can't allow it to be exposed that the president is presiding over a system. And the way that would be exposed is if Trump said, look, I'm elected. Now, one thing, bring the troops out of Syria. They're not going to do it. And then that's going to expose that the system's a fraud.
This is what Trump actually said, and he wanted to do regarding Syria. Pull out the troops from Syria. What are you doing in Syria? Because the strategy was at the beginning, regime change. Okay, there was a timber sycamore covered operation by the CIA, and in parallel there was a Pentagon operation in Syria, and even the CIA and Pentagon funded groups, they were fighting each other underground in Syria. It's like a civil war between the CIA and the FBI groups in Syria. And the strategy failed after 7 years. When Trump came in power, he said enough is enough. He stopped the CIA operation. However, he wanted to withdraw from Syria. The pressure was very high on him. They did a fake staged so-called chemical attacks in Syria so that he goes more brutal against the president of Syria, and he called him an animal. He bombed Syria twice, etc. And up until this moment, they don't have an evidence for that. Not even the intelligence community in the United States have any certain conclusions about this case. It's just a media talk about it, and we all know their so-called sources underground who are like, it's like you found a group underground in Syria called the White Helmets. It comes the funding from the United States, from Germany, from the EU, from Canada. And then you use this group as a sample gathering operatives underground. How can these people be even reliable, right? But before digging into the Twitter files, what are the motives of Musk in publishing these documents? Is he really genuine in his claims that he wants to give service to humanity, to bring free speech into Twitter, or he has other intentions and motives in this regard?
Well, I'll start by saying this, and this is my immediate emotional reaction to that, right? When someone says, hey, what about what about his intentions? My immediate reaction without thinking is, I don't really care. You know what I mean? I know what I'm responsible for. I was in law enforcement for many, 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 many years, right? Retired, I was a law enforcement official in the state of Maryland. And you'd have a person who somebody told him, I committed the murder. And this guy comes in and he says, look, I know who committed the murder, but I got 5 years and I've already served 2.5. You let me out now, I'll tell you, right? Now, here's the bottom line. He really does know who the murderer is.
Mm-hmm.
His intentions are, what's in it for me, right? So his intentions may not be pure. He may not be like, well, I just want to see justice for the dead. But I don't care. I'm like, I go to the state's attorney. The guy served 2.5 years. I say we get the info and let him out. The state's attorney looks over the case and says, yeah, he's in for bad checks and this and that. Do it. Right?
Yep.
What do I care about it? It may be that he likes the guy's girlfriend and he's like, I'm going to get out and date his girlfriend. I don't care. If you got the data, give me the data, the why you did it. The truth is this. I can never even really know why. If I ask Elon Musk today, why'd you do this? And he gives me an answer, he could be lying. In fact, let me go one further. I hate to get too philosophical. He may not know why. You may say to him, why? And it may be because when he was 4 years old, he couldn't have a toy bear, and he always wanted a toy bear, and he always wanted to push back against authority because he never got his toy bear. But he doesn't know that. He thinks it's just for some other reason. See what I mean? It can be, we can do things as human beings that we don't even know why the hell we did them. So that being the case, I could care less why he did it. I know I got the data now. And this is an important thing I want to get to. This is an important thing that I really want to get to. I remember I was covering the Democratic Party convention when the WikiLeaks information came out about the DNC emails. And there was a discussion about, everything. Oh, it's this and that. And I remember saying, we all knew it. We intuitively knew what was going on. But now we just have the evidence for something we intuitively knew, right? All of it. Everybody knew that they were up to no good. Now, the great thing about the Twitter is, we knew this. Day to day, you could see one person tweets something, another person tweets the same exact thing. New York Times writes something in an article. You take the sentence out of that article, put it in there, attribute it to the New York Times, add New York Times's, tags and everything to it. And you get suspended for a month for doing it. You know what I mean? So we all intuitively could look at the evidence and we knew what Twitter was up to. And now that we see exactly what they were up to, rather than anybody, grabbing their chest and falling in shock to the floor, we're all like, we knew it. We knew it. So that's the beauty of it. We knew it. And I got to add this, which means this. People now have to accept their intuition when it comes. Does anybody really think, when we look at the FBI files, does anybody really think when we see that the FBI was meeting with Twitter, that they weren't meeting with Google and Microsoft? And we even see it now. They were meeting with Facebook. They were meeting with Instagram. So basically, what we are seeing in Twitter is what's going on. Let me add this. You think they're not meeting with MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post? So it is what we're seeing. No wonder it's exactly what you're saying, that we have the same sentence. The walls are closing in, or whatever the hell it is that you see everywhere. It's because the government is meeting with media, social media, everything, and handing them exactly as we call, a lot of us referred to them as stenographers for the government. We were even more on point than we knew. They are literal stenographers for the government.
Yep. I want to mention something here. Like in the past years, I followed extensively the mainstream media because I want to see what they write about Syria, right? And every time they publish a story and I do my investigation, for example, underground, and we find sometimes there is a slightly difference and sometimes it's like 180-degree difference from the reality underground. For example, the reports that they published with complete confidence that in 2018 there was an alleged chemical attack in Syria, and then we have to bomb Syria, right? And they were like, praising the beauty of the missiles falling on Syria, for example. None of these journalists or outlets were banned or suspended from social media for spreading fake news on Syria. And after 2 years or 3 years, we found out that within the OPCW, the whistleblowers, the people, the researchers, the investigators who are underground in Syria, they came out and they said our conclusions were taken out from the final report of the OPCW, and nobody apologized for that, and none of these reports were even suspended. Like I think the New York Times, they published the augmented reality of augmented version of their reality, how a chemical attack happened in Duma in 2018, and they didn't even delete this article from their website, and it's still there. So anyone who wants to go and read the literature of Syria, or wants to do research or write a PhD or something, these articles are there and being used as a fact by scholars, right? So it's so horrible how we can shape not only the general public's opinion, but also intellectually when we see like people writing books and they're quoting these outlets, although these outlets aren't reporting completely correctly in this regard. So in this case, we see also shadow banning, for example, right? So I really want to know on what basis Twitter accounts were shadow banned. Is it on a political lines, ideological lines? How do they decide to shadow ban someone, suppress his reach? Because personally, for example, I have, I don't know, around 50,000 followers, and then you don't see it's matching the increase of your followers with the reach. So there is something missing there, right?
Yeah. Well, I think we found something out now, and I think it's clear that the discussion we're having is a discussion. It's different if you discuss a social media company as a social media company that's there and it's open and you can talk about whatever, and that they legitimately are trying to police speech that would be harmful or something like that. What we found now is this, and they've used the most recent Twitter files release made it clear that Twitter was part of a giant narrative control, a set of narrative control tools. That's what Twitter was part of. And we saw in this latest release that there were people who had made, who had tweeted, who had made posts that were directly from the government, from the National Institute of Health, from the CDC. But because that particular passage presented in that way could be damaging to the narrative that they wanted to portray, they would, in some way, shape or form, shadow ban it. They would find a way to make it either punish the person who was doing it or make it real difficult. So the reality is, you can't even discuss Twitter from the perspective of an honest actor. You know what I mean? They were not an honest actor. They were deliberately lying to us. They were doing narrative control. No concern, which means, as you said, the New York Times, this is about narrative control. What you're saying is right, and it's intentional. You know what I mean? They want to make sure that people don't find out that everything they told us about Syria was a lie. You know why? Because everything they told us about Iraq was a lie, and everything they're telling us about Ukraine is a lie. And you know what I mean? They don't want us to find out that all of the things there that you could research and go back. They don't want to drop the articles that support their narratives. And part of it is they have no choice. If what you're saying is all lies, if even the foundation of foreign policy is a lie, they say to the American people, we're out to do good, or we're opposing dictators. You know, the democracy versus authoritarianism.
Investing in democracy now in Ukraine.
They're all lies. And it's easy to debunk them. So they really do have a lot of work on their hands to support and maintain these narratives that are easily debunked. I think that's what we learn of it. These narratives are so easily debunked, they got to work hard to try to keep them afloat.
Garland, I think you are spreading misinformation now on my YouTube channel. The FBI and with their assets in Twitter, they just have their best interest, our best interest in their heart, and they want to spread democracy in Ukraine. They want to spread democracy in Syria, and they are spending over $100 billion in Ukraine in order to keep the democracy, right, in Ukraine. And really what bothers me, like during the pandemic, for example, the people who decide to ban like medical doctors, professionals, people who have patents in their names regarding vaccines, they have been banned by people who don't have a degree anywhere close to the degrees of these people, and they were framed as conspiracy theorists during the pandemic. And now all these people are back. So I think Twitter will be, in my opinion, a better place comparing to, for example, Facebook. As you mentioned, I really don't care why Musk is doing this. At the end of the day, I just want to be treated a little bit more fairly. To present my ideas on, I'm not a populist. I'm not presenting anything really controversial or saying things that shouldn't be said in public or crossing the lines. No, we're just presenting some ideas, and we're trying to say, guys, the policies that these people say, the deep state say that they are pursuing in Syria, for example, or elsewhere, it's not in the interest of the people there. I'm from there and I know what's happening on the ground. They are literally choking the people there, like 18 million people. So they try to frame you, right? But in your opinion, there is something that really bothers me. Like, we know all these facts, right? And now the manipulations through the platforms and these agencies. But there are people on Twitter and elsewhere, they refuse to believe that there is a state intervention. They're completely embedded with the ideas of the government, of the media, and they're defending them. Sometimes I feel like for free, on Twitter, like they're doing their job. How much there is, brainwashing happening in the United States when it comes to foreign policy, affairs?
Yeah, that's a very big issue that we're dealing with, and that's what we're talking about: ensuring that people don't get the legitimate information so they can evaluate on their own what's right and wrong. And so you've got a lot of people as Voltaire said, and he may have put it differently, but any belief that is not founded in reason and logic will not be swayed by it. So their positions were not born of logic. It was, as an example, it may be this: I'm on the blue team, and my team all believes this. If you're a Democrat, give me a list of names and I can tell you who's the villains and who's the hero. Who are the heroes? Same with the Republicans. Give me a list of names. We can put a V or an H beside it. And if there's a hero beside it, everything they say we must believe. If there's a V for villain beside it, everything they say we must not believe. So it becomes these ideological cults. So you're not dealing with people who are, again, even honest actors in their discussion. From their perspective, their particular cult, the blue cult or the red cult, generally in Maryland, in America, believe one thing or the other, and they go along with that. But, let me bring that back to something that you said. I think it's very important. And that is, do we say things that are really, over the top, on the third rail, outlandish? Here's the question we got to ask ourselves. If I say, because sometimes, people who are on social media, content creators will say, if I say this, is this too far? If I say this, is this over the edge, right? But the question we have to ask ourselves is, who should make that decision? Who should make the decision that what you say about Syria or what I say about Syria or COVID or Ukraine or whatever the case may be, what's over the edge? Certainly I can say, if I say I'm going to commit violence against someone, things of that nature, it's obvious. But what we are seeing now is things that are fairly benign unless you put them in the context of the prevailing narrative. If you put them in the context of the prevailing narrative, they can be very damaging to the prevailing narrative. So they are then censored. But when we get to that question, who should decide? Here's what's important. What we were told is that Twitter, using a concrete set of rules and standards in their terms of service that we could all read, right? They were the ones who were going to decide what was over the edge, what was on the third rail, what shouldn't be said, right? That this private company had a set of standards that we could all read. And based on those standards, we could know what to post or not. So who was doing it? The company. And what we were being told, the argument was it's not a First Amendment violation because the company is setting the standards. They're giving you a copy of the standards, the terms of service, and they are adhering to those standards. And even if they aren't, they're not the government, right? What we found out was it wasn't the company. Yes. That in fact, it was the government using the company as a proxy. So the First Amendment makes it clear who should decide what's on the third rail or over the edge when it comes to speech? Not the government. But that's specifically who was doing it. Therefore, they had no choice but to lie then. They had to lie to Congress. They had to lie to us, Twitter. Everybody had to lie because the big thing that was hidden was the government was deciding the standards upon which a speech would be protected or allowed, and the standards were arbitrary.
Garland, if the Azov battalion has a Twitter account and they're not banned, and they themselves say we are Nazis, they say we are Nazis. Don't call us anything else. We are Nazis. They say we are waging a crusader war against the subhumans. Like, this is in their literature. I'm not bringing up anything from me, right? So if they exist and they are spreading their ideas on social media, then the bar for free speech is too high, right? On Twitter. Then anything below that should not be really banned. But despite that, it's suppressed, it's banned, it's shadow banned, and lots of things are happening on Twitter, unfortunately, and on YouTube and other social media accounts. And I really wish that Twitter would be repaired and become a better place. If Twitter becomes a content creator friendly and treating fairly people, why not? I would move all my work to Twitter.
Absolutely.
I don't mind. I don't have any sort of contract with YouTube or something, right? I'm really struggling to bring information to the people. This is what I believe. It's my job. Every day I wake up, I want to make the world a better place, to inform my surrounding, to open some eyes, right? This is what I really like to do. And you are doing brilliant job on Twitter. I'm really happy to be following you guys. I will put Garland's Twitter account in the description below. Please go and follow him and see what is he writing. It's a very eye-opening. He does lots of sarcasm, but you can read between the lines when he does sarcasm, and you understand the point when he does it. He's an amazing person as well. Like on a human level, you can see through his writings. Garland, it was a really nice talking to you on my show. It's a really pleasure and honor for me to talk to you. I will definitely invite you again in next year in 2023.
Here we go.
A few days left for this year. You're a radio talk show host and political analyst in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you.